What's good, bro?
What's up?
Back at it again.
Like a crack addict.
Back at it like a crack addict. Let me get the hat.
We need the hat.
We draw a topic out of the hat. If you've never seen one of these videos before.
If you're new.
Then we go from there.
Generally.
We'll figure it out. We might stage a fake debate, or we might decide to fuck it. I think it's your turn to draw one, right?
I believe it is.
There you go. We're getting pretty close to making a sort of a dent in the topics.
Are we?
I think so.
Ooh, Aristotle. I also think I was the one who wrote this, because I don't think it's spelled right.
Let me see. No, that's right.
Is it?
Yeah, it's got like a capital R.
That's how
it's
I write.
Like assault rifle Stottle.
Hey,
what's
man.
AR stand for?
Like the actual,
yeah, like the gun.
Armalite.
Yeah, Armalite Stottle is Stottle. Anyway, so how do you feel? What are you feeling? Based in cringe? Flip a coin?
Yeah, fuck it.
All right.
Go grab that wooden nickel over there.
Mm-hmm. Where are you looking at on that?
Right above your record thing. Over there on that CD case.
Oh, yeah.
On that jewel case.
No, I see it. Who would win? Jewel case or jewel case?
What?
A case for your jewel or a jewel case for your CD?
I don't know. They're both pretty cringe.
Yeah, jewel cases fucking suck. That's a debate topic. Anyway,
Is
Aristotle.
There's no way that's a debate topic.
Why? Because we both agree that they're fucking ass?
Yeah, they're fucking ass.
All right. So heads is the head. I'll let you flip. So, you'll flip it. Just flip it. Heads.
Oh, that's not fair. It stuck to my hand.
So I get to pick.
That stuck to my hand. That doesn't count.
Oh, fuck you. The one time I win the coin flip, it doesn't count. All right, do it again.
All right.
Heads.
All right, you win.
So I get to decide whether I'm on the Aristotle is based side of the debate or the Aristotle is cringe side of the debate. Well, let's see, man. I'm thinking... Last time we did Diogenes, last time we did one of these philosophies, I had to be cringe. I think I'm going with based this time. I think I'm going to argue why Aristotle's based.
Okay.
We got 30-minute lead time to research.
Okay.
So, here we go. If there's anything good, I'll throw it in here. Otherwise, I'll just cut it out.
So about 4:30.
Yep. That sounds good to me.
I wrote down Aristotle.
Yeah, you spelled it wrong there.
He lived to be pretty old.
Not to break into our time, but I have a small tangent. You ever do something slightly odd, and you're like, I wonder if I'm the first person ever to do this? Like right now, I got my Mountain Dew and my vodka. Researching for an Aristotle debate, I'm like, how many Aristotle debaters have pre-gamed with Mountain Dew and vodka? It's going to be a small amount, right?
Probably.
That makes me happy when I feel like I'm doing something that may have never been done before. But anyway, I'll let you get back to it. I just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, it's going to be hard.
Well, we got another Greek and another tangent that I think with the based and cringe is it might be a little bit harder to argue cringe because pretty much all of the Greeks are so ingrained in like all philosophy that like anybody would debate about now.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like the cornerstone, like all philosophies fucking are spring forth from the cornerstone of Greek. So like even arguing that some of them are cringe is like kind of difficult because you have to like completely like go back on some things that you just sort of take for granted normally in philosophy, I feel like. Or some element of that, anyway.
You know what this feels like?
What?
You know when you're in class and you're like taking whatever standardized test you have to take and it's the dead fucking silence of everyone doing it? That's what this feels like.
We just need some pencil sounds.
Hey man, you can't be doing that now. You gotta have like random crinkling. Somebody's always crinkling. Right.
happen. We'd have to do some of ours on computers. And there was this one girl who was annoying in general, but this one time, and during this I don't know if I've ever told you this, but there's...
Do I know who it is?
Yes, you know who exactly.
Okay.
But we were taking the test or whatever, and then, like... I did them pretty fast, because I read fast. So it's like... It usually would take me, like, half or a third of the time. Like, if it's 45 minutes, it'd take me, like, 20.
Right.
So she was done in, like, 10 or 15. And then for the rest of the time, I swear to God... But then it was like, but it was an actual keyboard.
Yeah,
like, with
so
a
it
stick
had
of
like a
buttons.
mechanical noise.
Yeah, so it was like...
Oh.
Like...
That's fucked up.
Just because you want to blitz yours and, you know, stay in the fucking 8th grade another couple of years.
Right.
Some of us have shit to do.
For real. Like, bring a book. Read.
Yeah. That's what I always did.
Exactly. Yeah, I was always done pretty quick, too.
And here we are. Aristotle. Based and or fucking cringe.
Okay.
So, first of all, let me say,
hey, man.
I just...
Close your books.
I had this grand, I don't want everyone to see my rock hard erection. I had this grand...
Is that still recording when it's closed?
That's a fantastic question. Probably not.
I mean, literally close your books. I meant close your tabs.
Yeah, it's still recording. Good to know.
Funky.
Anyway. So, what did I want to... I had about 10 or 15 minutes in, I had this statement I wanted to say first, just in general, broadly.
Okay.
But, yeah, more than... Well, I was going to say, it was funny because Diogenes was our first philosopher we did. Mm-hmm. By a random draw of the hat. And now we did Aristotle. Both Greeks. But it's also nice because, comparatively, a lot of what Diogenes was about is like easier to digest, right?
Right.
So it's a lot easier for us to, like, in 30 minutes get a grand grasp on, like, pretty much everything overall about Diogenes and then go from there. But with Aristotle, I was definitely, like, I was reading and I'd be like 15 or 20 minutes in. I'm like, oh shit, I haven't even got to fucking biology yet. I gotta fucking skim and scroll down. So, a lot more challenging to, like, wrap your head around everything. So obviously 30 minutes of research is going to be, you know.
It's kind of the point.
Yeah, I know. We just got to call ourselves somewhere and go from there. But, in comparison to Diogenes, it's just funny that we got, like, another famous Greek philosopher, but also just has the opposite problem of being, like, way too much for anyone to, like, grasp in 30 minutes completely, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So, let me talk about why Aristotle is pretty base for a couple minutes here, and then I'll pass it over for you to counter or introduce your thesis or whatever. Knock this up just a little bit, too.
Gross.
So, Aristotle, here's what's based about Aristotle. Is that, like, first of all, he talked about, like, fucking everything. Like, that existed in, like, for him to look at and think about in his world. Although a lot of it doesn't survive, in its original form. Apparently a lot of what we have now that was actually written by him is, like, lecture notes and shit.
Right.
A lot of it, as opposed to, like, the actual books and stuff he wrote that were intended to be read by somebody other than him, but... So every single conceivable, pretty much, subject that would be around for him to comment on, there's something Aristotelian that exists out there, right?
Right.
Or there's at least an Aristotelian framework to look at it with, right?
Right.
And although, like, I don't know, I don't feel like Aristotle lives on, like, strongly in modern philosophy as much as maybe I would have assumed before it does in some extent, but there's not a lot of Aristotle guys.
Right.
There's not a lot of, I mean, like, you got, like, Ayn Rand is one of the only people in the last 100 years who was like, Aristotle is, like, the main philosophical person that I follow. You know what I mean?
Say that again?
Ayn Rand?
That is Ein.
I've always heard it as Ayn.
Really?
So, it doesn't matter. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Atlas Shrugged. You know. She has her own movement. Maybe we need to put Objectivism in the fucking hat.
Probably. I thought it was in there.
Maybe it is. I don't remember if it is or not. If it is, maybe we'll draw it next time. That would be
torture.
It would be torture, but it would be coincidental. Happily coincidental. So that's the first thing that's based about Aristotle. Second of all, like, for the most part, from what I saw, like, a lot of the ways he looked at certain things, because we're pretty based. We're pretty based. Let me say that. So, I'm not the biggest fan of, like, quote unquote, like, hard rationalism about everything, right?
Right.
Because in the modern discourse, there's a certain tendency to, like, because when you're having an argument, the idea is that, like, you should have a logically sound argument, right? Which makes sense. It's a good rule of thumb to have, but also at the same time, like, if you have, like, a debate where, like, one side is so obviously, like, fallacious just in its, like, premises, but the argument that it builds on top of the premises are stronger than the other person, you don't necessarily have to find that the fallacious premises person correct. Like, I'm trying to think of a good example, like...
Anything Ben Shapiro says?
Sure, that's a good example. Well, let's say, let's have an argument. Fuck flat Earth. I want to argue that the ocean is bottomless, right? Okay. The ocean has no bottom, and I build my arguments. And I have really logically sound arguments, okay? Okay. And you're like, you're a fucking idiot. The ocean has a bottom, right?
We've seen it.
Yeah. Well, that's what you think. So, but your argument is the worst argument of all times, right?
Right.
In terms of the argument, I win, right? But that doesn't all of a sudden make the ocean actually bottomless. Right. Because I won this argument, right? Right. So, there's an element of, like, empirical rationality in the way that Aristotle looked at the world. And he would look at political ideas and he would look at just, like, logic itself, like, in a fairly empiricism-based mindset. But at the same time, he never wrote or did it in a way that was, like, in and of it, like, for the benefit of empiricism or, like, let's be hyper-rational all the time. Because there's, like, one of the most interesting things that I read was, like, there's a part where he's talking about political philosophy, which I'll probably get into. I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more in detail, but just, he's talking about, like, these forms of government and then, like, the good form of it and the bad form of it, right? And on one of them, he's talking about rule by multiple people. And he calls, like, democracy the bad form of it. Because it gives a bunch of power to the poor, right? Instead of the wealthy intellectual people who are well read and they know shit about it. It's like the poor will have, if it's pure democracy, the poor will have a full run of everything, right? But when he, like, in his writing about it, he's like, he'll examine the other side too, and he's not gonna, like, act like a full democracy would have no benefit, because he's like, it could very well be in that city, state, or nation, or whatever, that the poor masses are 100% right about everything, and then the educated intellectual people are fucking wrong. Like, that can exist. Whereas some philosophers would make an argument based on where they once they reach their conclusion and they state their conclusion, the other side has to be wrong. You know what I mean? Right. Like, my conclusion cannot be true unless the other side is wrong. So, and that's like an undercurrent in, like, every aspect of, like, the logic that he uses to look at the world. So that's pretty based, I think. Because it has, like, the best of both. Because, like I said, when you get into hyper-rationality, it's like, it becomes like a rule set that you follow regardless of the fact of whether or not it actually makes any sense or practical, right? It's just a law that you live by. Like it's like you're some fucking, you live in a cult or something, or you're some,
right.
subscribe to the exact doctrine of some religion, no matter what. You know what I mean? So that's pretty based, I think. Because it's useful, but not, like, fucking jerking itself off.
Right.
Which is what we want out of any, like, if we're going to have laws or a logic that determines how we make laws, we want them to have rule enough to be practical, but not also, like, it has to be this way no matter what. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think that's pretty based. Those are two things I think are based anyway. But I'll let you get going a little bit because I went for like 5 minutes or so.
So here's my argument for why I think that Aristotle is cringe.
And I don't want to. Before you get going, I just want to say when I was reading shit, I'm like, Eric's gonna have some pretty good shit to go off on because there's some things about Aristotle even I'm like are cringe. So I'll see to you when I think something's cringe. I'll be like, that's correct because I'm just not saying it. So go ahead. Sorry.
The major thing that sticks out for me is, and this is for a lot of Greeks, they argue from the basis that humanity is an inherently rational thing. And that is completely incorrect. Aristotle's whole argument for logic is that humans are inherently rational and logical and beset upon by their own emotions and, like, humors.
Mm-hmm.
So, that is why we do things that counteract our rationale.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of...
Human nature.
Yeah, human nature.
Human nature counters the...
Instead of rationale counters human nature.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's like the major thing that I think is cringe for me. That and Aristotle believed that the best human is close to God or the prime mover.
Yeah.
Which, let me get on that because he basically formed the basis for most religious theology now. And I hate that. Because they've got this, the idea of the unmoved mover. He pretty much started that, which is pretty fucking cringe.
Yeah. That's pretty cringe. I'll give you that.
So...
Yeah, because, like, even more than... It's funny because it's come back now, but, like, Aristotle had, like, several translations that made their way into, like, burgeoning Islamic communities and shit.
Yeah.
So, Aristotle is more influential in some aspects of, like...
Islam.
Abrahamic Eastern thought than,
right.
like European Abrahamic thought. Like, Jewish and Christian thought. So it's... I mean...
Pretty fucking cringe.
So that's just interesting to me because it's just funny how like some weird circumstance like that can just influence like the broader mindset of like two halves of the globe.
Right.
Like this one dude who is dead.
Well,
fucking
Greece is pretty much like in the middle of what would be the Islamic world and what would be the medieval world. So they were kind of, because Turkey and Greece are pretty much like right next to each other, so it made it make sense.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is Aristotle's idea of godliness is simple, uncomplex thought. And that's what humanity should aspire towards. And it's because of our complexity is what keeps us away from that. Which is, in my opinion, incredibly cringe.
That can be, I can see where that can be argued to be pretty fucking cringe.
Right.
Like I said, I'll cede to that. So, back to based. Here's something that's based about Aristotle. Aristotle's a complex beast.
Right.
When I was reading about, when you hear the term ethics, right, when we argue about ethics today in philosophy, it's usually, people want to argue like ethical, ethics is a little bit too entwined with morality now, where it's like ethics is like, a lot of the time when you're having a debate about it, you're having a debate about like, what, if ethics are objective, where do they come from? Or like objective ethical behavior.
Right.
And like ethics as objective and shit. That in and of itself is cringe, right? So, but originally, when Aristotle was writing about ethics, which is like the genesis point of a lot of where other people took it and run with it, is that ethics is basically has nothing to do with morality. It is more like something that is ethical for a person to do is something that will like helps them like become a quote unquote better person. Right. So if you want to become wise, you know, like if it's good for human beings to be more wise and educated, then it is ethical to study under teachers who can help you towards that goal. Right. For instance. Right? And just that with everything.
Right.
Whereas it doesn't really have anything to do with, like, you know, morality in terms of is it good or bad to fucking steal this thing or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because, like, and that makes it ethics something worthy of its own argument, where now, like, the usage of the word, like I said, is way too intertwined with morality when they're not really supposed to be the same thing.
Right.
They're supposed to be two separate things. So it's when you look at it from that framework, the original framework, as far as I understand, was how he wrote about it. That makes it something that can be argued and debated and over. So, and I didn't know that before reading this. So that in and of itself is pretty based. Because it basically, to my mind, I'm reading it and I'm like, oh, so the modern usage of the word has basically like locked out this entire school of like, not school, but like this entire thing you can think about.
Right.
Which is, you get into language and everything else at that point, which I want to say something that's pretty based about language too. But go.
So one thing I think is incredibly cringe about Aristotle is his idea of virtue, where he believes that if someone is ugly, childless, friendless, and poor, they're an inherently less virtuous person than someone who has all of those things. Granted, because he says that they have less options to be virtuous. And even when they have these small chances to be virtuous, they affect very little. That is like reductionist, I think, in my mind. Where I think any amount of good is still good. You can't reduce, just because somebody's ugly doesn't mean they can't, do good. Yeah.
If good exists, then your standing or your circumstances shouldn't affect it.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. You can look at Aristotle and what is it? Is it Aristotelian, right?
Aristotelian, I think.
Aristotelian?
I think so.
Aristotelian virtue as being cringe.
Yes.
And we'll get into, I haven't said it, but there's things that are cringe that are in that vein of being ugly and like you're a shittier person based on shit like that. We'll get into that. Or I want to get into it if you don't bring it up. Just because.
Yeah, if you want to bring it up. I might not have read it, so.
But I got to stick it at the end because in my mind Aristotle's based. On this half of the couch, Aristotle's based. I've got a tape line.
Yeah.
Halfway up. In red flag lane, Aristotle's based.
Yeah.
Anyway. So, something else that is based about Aristotle. God, what was I going to say? This always happens to me.
I don't know.
I'm ready to like get into my topic. Then I'm like, all right, it's Eric's turn. I'm like, wow, what Eric's saying is pretty interesting. And like, got gears going. Gears are going. I'm like, shit, what was I going to say before he was saying what he was going to say? Give me a second.
Okay. Also, I think another thing that's very cringe about Aristotle is he was very pro-war in that
that's one thing
he believed that war was a chance for personal excellence, and for you to be a better person, you should strive for personal excellence, and war was a way to do that. And I think that's...
and also on war, because it's something that was one of the things I said I was going to bring up later if you didn't. But on war, so the idea, and it's connected with this virtuous idea that so if you are Greek, and you basically are it is virtuous for you to go take non-Greeks as slaves. Like if you're in war with another country or whatever and they're not Greek, because the Greeks fought too, but they were like, I fight with Spartans, but also we're better.
Right, we're better than
Spartans are still better than you. Right. So, that's pretty cringe.
Very much. Taking of slaves is
owning human beings is incredibly cringe.
Aristotle is canceled.
And also on that note, we might as well and he said war, you have to go, like, he wouldn't be anti-war because you have to go to war, because if people want to come take you as slaves, you have to fight them back.
Right.
Right? So, in and of itself, war is not bad. Therefore, war can be good, and also we should be able to take people who aren't Greek as slaves, so let's go to war with them. Right? That is cringe. I'll give you that. And also just, like, Aristotle is not the most misogynist ancient philosopher. But he's a little bit misogynist. For Greece, he's actually not too bad. Right. But pretty much like women need to do what men say, and they can't vote and any of that shit, of course. Right. But also, like, the things that lead to happiness for men are the same that lead to happiness for women, and women should be able to, like, women should be allowed to be happy and all this other shit too. So, like, it's not like sit at home and, like, fuck me and, like, shut up, right? And it's not that bad. Right. So for Greece, it's not that bad. Right. But, like, for us, it's pretty cringe, right?
Right. Another thing that I think is kind of cringe is Aristotle's idea of friends.
Sure. I didn't read about that, so tell me about that. I'm going to, skim through I'm opening my book so I can look at topics to see what I'm forgetting to talk about. But
Aristotle kind of had this idea of friends as, there's, like, 3 types of friendships. One that you gain from because of something you gain from somebody. One because you have equal virtue, and he has, like, imperfect and perfect friendships, where perfect friendships, they're on equal standing as far as, like, ethically and everything. Mm-hmm. It's just, the way he kind of described it is very strange to me.
It just seems like,
where he felt like you can't be friends with, you can't be perfect friends with a lot of people, which I kind of understand. But he also kind of talked about how friendships, they only work because you give and gain from each other. Not because you just enjoy doing things.
Yeah. Well, that's...
He kind of reduced friendship down to, like, an exchange almost.
Which, like, in some element, there's, like, some truth to it, right? Because a lot of, like, human socialization, if you want to boil it all the way down, it is, like, transactional, right? Right. But also, it feels like a branch off of his, like, epistemological way of looking at things, when there's a lot of aspects to human socialization that are inherently not logical.
I think that's... I think that's the issue. Yeah. Like, the major issue I had with Aristotle is he tried to apply too much logic to an inherently illogical set of ideas.
Mm. Yeah. That's a good, like, thesis.
Yeah.
It's a good cringe thesis. I agree with that.
You're a pretty cringe thesis.
Cringe Angels thesis. So, I was going to bring up, when it comes, like, to the ethical, like, the learning thing, right? Mm-hmm. Something I thought was pretty interesting is that, like...
I got a question.
Yeah.
So did he think it was ethical to take non-Greeks as slaves so they could, like, learn from the Greeks? Is that why he wanted...
I don't think that had anything to do with it.
Oh, he just was like, okay, it's cool to take non-Greeks as slaves.
So... The abolition of what he considers natural slavery would undermine civic freedom. The pursuit of freedom is inseparable from pursuing mastery over those who deserve to be slaves.
Oh.
According to the Cambridge Companion to Aristotle's Politics, the targets of this aggressive warfare were non-Greeks, noting Aristotle's view that our poets say it's proper for Greeks to rule over non-Greeks. And then it gets into the war thing.
That's pretty cringe.
So, there's certain people who deserve to be slaves, and there's nothing wrong with enslaving those people. Yeah,
that's gonna be a yikes for me, dog.
That's fairly cringe.
That's incredibly cringe.
So it's one of the most cringe things I've heard in a minute. Right. But, like...
Isn't that what, like, the Confederate States of America believed?
I think that's everyone who has ever tried to justify slavery. That's pretty much their
Some
argument.
People just deserve to be slaves?
Yeah. Well, it's proper. It's proper. That's why we do it.
Oh, okay. All right.
All right, brother. Yeah, they're like, yeah, I own this guy. Let me explain why that's the law of the universe. Like, grow up.
Literally.
It's natural law that I own this house.
Right.
Anyway, so there's like this, this seems pretty complex, so I'm just like skimming the surface even in regards to how much we're sort of skimming anyway, but like this idea of like potentiality where the idea is that it's ethical, if you're trying to achieve something, it's ethical for you to learn under people who are trying to teach you or whatever.
Right.
So he didn't believe in the idea that like, let's say you're a talented like instrumentalist, right?
Yeah.
That you're like born that way. Like talent's a meme, basically, is my thesis statement. Talent's a fucking meme.
Which it is.
Talent's a meme, and Aristotle argued basically that talent is a meme and you just pursue and learn things in order to achieve them. And that's based because it's like true. That's pretty based.
Yeah.
But we can also get into, I think what I was going to say before I had my tangent about forgetting shit is just like in general getting into politics, where one thing I appreciate about Aristotle, one thing that's based about it, the way he talked about politics, is that he didn't talk about political law the same way that he would talk about like natural law, or like he talked about it in an obviously prescriptivist way. Where it's like we're just describing the way that laws form and like communities interact and all this other shit. So that's based. All right. Does it claim to be? It is, as opposed to some of the other things you were saying are cringe. It's obviously like just saying we're just talking about it how it is and not like trying to pretend it's something it's not.
Right.
Broadly, I don't.
Right.
And you could probably criticize nitty details that disagree with that, but when it comes to the politics, like the idea of like constitutions, what I appreciated was the idea that laws. I'm trying to figure out how to tackle this, because it's like I keep remembering 4 other things that I need to say before I'm going to say what I say. So he was generally of the opinion that a state will come about when a certain person creates laws that other people then begin to follow, right? So like his idea is that any state comes out of a founding person.
Right.
Right. And not necessarily out of like weird like 10 people and we vote on things and this is what we think, right? So there's the element of it comes from a single person and then disseminates around. But he also talks about like the idea that law reflects it. A bad law is one that does not reflect the people of which are supposed to live under it. Right. So he doesn't talk about like we should make laws that adhere to some form of objective morality or ethicality or whatever. It's like a good lawmaker is one who makes laws based on the people that live in the community or city, state, or nation or whatever.
Right.
So that is a proper and good way to make laws, as opposed to anything else. Which I think I pretty much agree with. Right? Like I don't believe that like if some other group has a law that they want to adhere to that like my group doesn't agree with, I don't think that like we necessarily need to be telling them how wrong their law is, right?
Right.
If they decide they want to live under it, then there's no objectivity to the morality of it, so who gives a fuck? Right. If that's what they want to do, and that's why like for instance, like if a country wants to make cannibalism legal, right? As long as you're not killing people, like I don't give a fuck.
Right.
Like I don't think it needs to be inherently outlawed everywhere.
Right.
Just because I don't want to eat people. You know what I mean?
Right.
So in that aspect, it's kind of based.
I do have objection to his opinion on democracy, though.
Me too. So, but go ahead.
His idea that just in pure democracy, the poor, unwashed masses will like rule everything.
I mean that is
true.
Yes.
But it's not bad.
Yeah. Well, yes.
Because if the majority of the people want something to be a certain way, then that's how it should be. Just because they're poor does not mean their opinion on how they should be ruled should be held in any less regard. In fact, it should be held in more regard than the rich Just because the rich are more educated does not mean that they have the best in mind for everybody else. They will inherently have what's best for them in mind instead of what's best for everybody.
This is true. This is true of most human beings, right?
Literally. That's the problem.
Yeah, well...
Is Aristotle thought too logically about the rationale of human beings and thought, well, these rich people are educated, so they're gonna keep the goodwill of everybody else in mind when they make laws. That will never happen. All they'll do is they'll pass laws that will keep them rich and keep the poor people poor.
And hopefully extend the gap even more. Right?
Incredibly so.
Yeah, I saw this chart on like 3 websites. So here's a political chart, right? So it's got like, maybe I'll throw it up on the screen, but just to explain in case I don't or I forget or whatever. So there's like the types of government is this way. So it's like a government by one person, by a few people, and by many people or the majority of people, right?
Right.
And then under each kind, there's like the true form of it, which is for the benefit of everybody overall, and then the perverted is how this chart on Wikipedia says it, is the perverted, which is like for the good of one part of the overall community. So under one, it's like a royalty is, if you have a monarchic government, it can be called a royalty if it's for the good of it, like everybody's benefit, and then if it just benefits the tyrant, it's tyranny.
Right.
And then under that is aristocracy and oligarchy, where just the rich control everybody else, and then fuck everybody. And then a constitutional government is under of many for good, and then democracy, which I think we can assume is pure democracy. Well, because when we talk about democracy today, we don't necessarily talk about pure democracy, but I think that's what he was talking about.
Well, because that's what his idea of democracy was.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
Newsflash, America is not a democracy. Can we please stop saying it?
Yes. Never was.
Never has been, never will be.
The fucking not the Confederate States, under the Articles of Confederation, we were the most democratic we've ever been.
Right.
And that wasn't very democratic.
Exactly. Honestly, we should not have been the United States of America. We should have been the American Republic and just been done with it. You know what I mean? That simplifies it. Just down. We're the American Republic. Done. We're all done.
Bro.
What?
You're on some NRA propaganda bullshit right now.
I am not.
Yeah, because what is it?
I am not. Oh, shut up.
No,
I swear to God,
listen.
If you say, because the initials are AR, I'm like...
I'm just saying.
Fuck you. God damn it. And I own one.
So, okay. So just the idea that there can be good and bad forms of these different governments, in and of itself,
right,
it's a based way to look at it, just because it allows, like when I said it argues both sides, it allows to have the argument to begin with.
Right.
Like, that is one thing, for the most part, besides a few exceptions that we've pointed out so far. For the most part, the Aristotelian era, I'm going to say it, not only am I going to say it wrong each time, I'm going to say it a different way every time.
Probably.
I promise. The Aristotle way of looking at it allows for more actual, like, conversation and variance than a lot of other contemporaries or even philosophers that come after, which is kind of based.
Right. He didn't let his philosophy become an echo chamber.
Yeah.
Which is very nice. It's convenient.
Yes. Also, something else that's based that I forgot. Like I said, he talked about everything. So I got the Wikipedia one of the pages that I read is the Wikipedia, and I'm scrolling through, and when I see a topic, I'm like, all right, I remember what was based about that. So when it comes to economics, right? His view of money was based. Okay, because no one. Do you like currency, Eric? Overall, do you think currency is based or cringe? As an idea.
As an idea? That's a hard one.
That is a hard one. But listen, if you're Aristotle, right?
Okay.
Currency. So there's no good way to, like, determine some value of different objects that we can work with, right?
Right.
Like if we're in a market and I need a banana for my family to live, right?
Uh-huh. And
then the guy selling the banana needs a chair for his family to sit on, otherwise their ankles are going to break or whatever, right?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, but he doesn't have he's got a banana, but he doesn't have the money, right?
Right.
But, like, how do you exchange a banana for a chair? Like, this guy's fucked. The chair guy probably needs something. I need the banana. Well, if we got money, well, I could say, well, here's some money for the banana. Now he's got more money for his chair. All right, so it's all working to like, so we can all have what we need, right?
Right.
Okay. But he also criticized the idea of like a retail trade because it was purely for profit, which served nobody.
Right.
And he also criticized the idea of people who like he doesn't talk about like lending money itself but more just the idea of like how interest works is like interest is just money accumulating more value for itself to the benefit of like nobody except like the person who controls the interest, right?
Right.
So it's, again, antithetical to the idea that, like, money just serves as, like, the most convenient way to ascribe some sort of value to everything to the point where we can, like, move it around and exchange what we need and everything.
Right.
That's overall a based way. Like, if economics exists, that's the most based way to have it, right?
Right.
Because if we all can just have what we need by trading.
It's the only morally righteous version of economics.
Yes, exactly. Like, the idea of gaining a bunch of profit and being greedy and shit, like, is just fuck off.
Right.
So, that's kind of based. I feel like I've been talking for a few minutes, so I don't know if there's anything else cringe.
That's pretty based in my opinion.
No, that's pretty based. Okay. I didn't get into poetics, like, in art in general and shit, because I felt like that would be too fucking... I just skimmed the whole section.
Yeah,
because I have this book on criticism I've been reading, and I'm still at the part where I'm reading, like, Greeks talking, like, Plato talking about poetry and shit. And this shit's, like, it's interesting, but goddamn, it's like, Plato's like, yes, here's my 40-page dialogue on good and bad poetry. And he's fucking stroking his beard. I'm like, goddamn, man, like, it is dense as fuck.
Right.
It's just, and as, like, we're like creatively minded people, right? Half of what we do on fucking YouTube is talk about art that we like.
Right.
That just seems like a fucking, the rabbit hole I don't want to go down. So I kind of skip past it. But I'm trying to see if there's anything else. Also, when he talked about like the three-way, if you're writing or having a conversation, the three ways to appeal to people as ethos, pathos, and logos. I pretty much think that's like the three big ones. I think he was pretty, like, spot on.
Yeah.
Like, there's variance, but I think that, like, generally that's, like, you can get through most, like, social interactions in life if you're trying to appeal to somebody, some aspect of somebody, you could be like, all right, are we doing ethos, pathos, or logos, right?
Right.
I think that's a pretty, like, overall it ends up being pretty comprehensive.
Right.
So that's a little bit based in and of itself. And then I didn't really read much about astronomy. But the other based thing about Aristotle, to my mind, is we both have a little bit of biology education background, right?
Yeah,
we like biology.
He was like discovering shit that wasn't rediscovered for like thousands of years and shit.
In terms of just like Greek and European biological studies, I can't speak on a lot of the other parts of the world because I'm just not familiar. Like, Aristotle basically was not surpassed until well into, like, the fucking, like, 15 and 1600s and shit. Yeah. Which is, like, in no other regard, like, in no other aspect of the things he talked about was that true. Like, because like we said, in Islamic countries, they were looking at Aristotle fucking logic and shit.
Right.
And then by, like, 12 and 1300... Aristotle was, like, rediscovered in the Western world. So they were arguing about shit. But, like, biology, like, nobody touched it shit for a long fucking time. Right. Just because, I guess, nobody cared to... But it's cool just to see that he was, like... He really was interested in pretty much everything that a human being could be interested in at the time, right?
Right. He was probably one of the first people you could be considered as a Renaissance man.
Yeah. So, that in and of itself... The fact that he was, like, so willing to just, like... I guess you could look at it from the framework of he started with the way he looks at things, and then he just looked at everything.
Right.
That's pretty based.
Yeah.
And a lot of the shit he did in regards to biology was fucking... Just the shit he discovered and the way he, like, talked about, how species work and shit.
Yeah.
Which is very complex and shit.
He was one of the first people to, like, discuss embryonic development.
Yeah.
And he was, like, right.
Yeah. Yeah. So that shit is all cool as fuck.
Right. Aristotle's cool. He just kind of cringe.
Yeah. Well, that's... I'm saying pretty much all the shit that you said that was cringe, I agree with. So, you got me there. Which is... It's how it's gonna go most of the time.
Right.
Right? We're just gonna cherry pick.
Right. We're too similar, so we can't really have an argument about what's actually based in cringe, because we pretty much agree.
But last I want to say, because I remembered this, is that Plato was a student of Socrates, and Aristotle was a student of Plato. But much like Diogenes, he said, I don't really agree... Oh shit, our lights are disappearing.
Yeah, you keep hitting the button, I think.
No, it came unplugged.
Oh.
That's all right.
Well.
I think we're on the downswing for the most part. Anyway. But Platonic ideals, he was like, yeah, there's like, it's a little bit like that, but like, not really.
He was
a lot more practical.
Yeah, he was like, okay, so how are you going to prove that this mystical world of forms exists? Plato's like, I don't know. And Aristotle's like,
Plato was on like some like collective unconscious shit. Kind of. And Aristotle wasn't really interested in that kind of thing.
No, he was
not very interested,
The example I saw was an example of why do we think that a horse is, like, beautiful? Because it has characteristics that we find it, like, attractive to it. Because, it's in good health. It has nice, like, hair color and that.
Yeah.
Plato's idea would be, it's because of some unconscious thing in the world of forms.
Yeah.
That's why we find this horse to be, like, aesthetically pleasing.
So, and there's this idea, too. I'll throw this up on the screen, too. This is from the Wikipedia page, this images. But it's like the four causes. So instead of like a Platonic ideal table, right? And then we see a table and we're like, that's a table because we have the Platonic ideal of a table in our head. And then we can assign the label of table to the table when we see it. There's this idea of the four causes, and then you can see it in the image or whatever. But there's like a chain of relation. So there's like, the table is what it's made of. The table is... It's all... If you have a Platonic ideal of a table, it can't look like every single table that exists. It just doesn't make any sense. So, there's how it actually looks. There's what is the table made of. Because the table can be made of... Basically, I think your average person would agree that if it looks like a table, and you can use it as a table, it's probably a table.
Right.
Regardless of how it looks. So, there's no, like, idea or material that it has to be a table. And then, in the end, what does it get used for? Right?
Right.
So it's a lot more comprehensive way of looking at objects and the ideas of objects and shit from like an epistemological point of view than simply having the Platonic ideal, and then you just have to assign labels.
Another thing that I kind of find pretty cringe about Aristotle is his belief in like a soul, because there were other Greeks who didn't.
There were other Greeks that, Aristotle...
Like Epicurus, he didn't believe in a soul.
Aristotle pretty much said that, like, the psyche or the soul or whatever, consciousness, we could call it, is just, like, the form that inhabits the material of body, and it is, like, it's, like, material. The body is material, but the psyche is something immaterial or unknowable or whatever. So, yeah. Yeah, I don't really... believe in a soul either, so that can be considered pretty good.
I out of all of the Greeks that I have ever studied, I think the closest to whom I agree with is Epicurus in most of what he said.
I think I'm a Diogenes man.
Really? I think if you read more about Epicurus, I think you agree with me.
I've read some. I haven't read anything that was written by people who... I've never read like an Epicurus book, right?
Right.
But I've read about Epicurus. I mean, I broadly agree with Epicurus, but Diogenes... I don't know, Diogenes is who I want to be. Epicurus might be like who I act like in real life.
Right.
Diogenes is like really who I want to be in life.
Alright.
But Aristotle, is he based or cringe? We we covered the basics pretty well, I think.
Yeah.
So...
I hate talking about the Greeks.
I think it's fun.
Okay, here's why I don't like talking about the Greeks. Is most of what they said doesn't even exist anymore, so you can't read it. I can't, like...
That is true. That's something else I wanted to bring up at some point, so I'm glad you said
because it's very hard... Because it would be easier to, like, argue whether what they believe was cringed or base if you had an actual
exactly what they
said in a concrete understanding of what they meant.
Yeah.
Because I think it's way easier to argue whether, like, Thomas Hobbes is based or cringe than if Aristotle is. Because we know we can read what Thomas Hobbes said. I can't read word for word
Well,
what
it's just
Aristotle
like
said.
Aristotle, for instance, right? Like, most of what his writing that exists is like I said, like lecture notes or just notes he made that he was going to write about more formally, right? So if you have a book, right?
Right.
Something that Thomas Hobbes wrote, fucking Machiavelli's The Prince, whatever, right?
Right.
If you have the book, you don't have to argue against the person, you just have to argue against, like, the ideas in the book, right?
Right.
It's like bite-sized, relatively, right? Whereas Aristotle's like, or lots of the Greeks, like you said. Just anybody who none of their writing exists. It's just like these vast swaths of ideas that are like sometimes like contradictory and shit, right?
Right.
Like if anybody like makes their job out of like constantly writing about their thoughts and like lecturing people, they're going to contradict themselves.
Right.
Let alone anything else. So it's just
right.
like it's a lot less like arguable against in and of itself.
And then you also have the issue of is if it's written by one of their students, how much bias is getting put into it? Yeah.
Like, did they just put what they agreed with?
Right.
You know what I mean?
So that's kind of the issue I have with trying to argue with the Greeks.
But it's kind of funny that the first two philosophers we've gotten so far have been Greeks just because they're like the genesis of most of them. It's just funny how it works to me. I don't know. The hat knows all. The hat guides us.
And in the hat, I believe.
But if you think Aristotle is based and cringe, or neither, let us know in the fucking comments.
How are you neither?
How are you neither based or cringe?
Yeah.
Alright, Bringe? Christ? That would be both, though. Yeah. Based and cringe. Most things are based and cringe. In equal measure. Not in equal measure, but in varying measures. Depending on the observer.
Is objectivism based or cringe?
Fucking cringe.
Yeah, it's dead ass cringe.
But if you're Anne Ayn Rand, then it's the most based thing that has ever existed, right? Right.
Okay, another thing that Aristotle said that I quite well agree with is everybody engages in philosophy because to argue against philosophy is engagement in philosophy. Yeah. So, no matter what you do.
I don't know the formal definition of philosophy, but it probably depends on who you ask. But at the end of the day, it's just like thinking.
Right.
Like if you're thinking about shit, that's philosophy.
Right, basically.
Like if there's a guy who like he's a fucking farmer, right? Yeah. Yeah. Or he picks apples and then he eats the apples. Right. Like clearly his philosophy for life is to pick apples and sleep, right? But that's still a philosophy.
Right.
That's just,
That's my kind of philosophy, though.
He's an apple. But anyway, let us know what you think in the comments below. If you have a philosopher that you want us to do, put it in the comments. And if it's not in the hat, we'll add it and get to it at some point. That's the one downside of having people suggest shit, is it just gets added to the hat. You know what I mean? Right. But maybe when we get the hat down, we'll keep it like 10 at a time or something. Maybe. Right. And that way, there's a 10% chance.
Or maybe we'll have a separate hat for like
viewer, yeah, and then go out of that once.
Yeah, like at least like once a month.
Or if we get more time to do it, we can always do more of these a week because they're not too hard to do. So right. All right. See you next week.